Hello and welcome to So What You're Saying Is. I'm Peter Whittle. Now, I'm delighted that my guest this week is somebody you already might be familiar with. Dr. Sebastian Gorka was a special advisor to President Trump in the White House. He's also a best-selling author, expert on intelligence, and indeed a broadcaster and host on Max News. I'm delighted that you are joining us here on the New Culture Forum, Sebastian.
Thank you for having me, Peter. I've been a subscriber to your program for several years now, and very impressed with the guests you get on. So it's an honor to be counted amongst those as well today.
Well, that's lovely. Thank you very much. This is quite an extraordinary career, Sebastian, you have. I do want to talk to you a little bit about it a little bit later on, but can I sort of rather start at the deep end, if you like? It's a question that a lot of people, a lot of our viewers here are asking, and that is one I'm sure you're asked a lot, which is it likely that President Trump will run again in 2024?
I don't like doing predictions. I find when people do predict things, they're never challenged on them, a year later or what have you. But I will make an exception for you, Peter. Yes, he is running. I have absolute, utter certitude. Everything he has done in the last 12 months makes that obviously clear. Right now, having spoken to those who've spoken to him recently, the question is the date of announcement. When will he declare? Will it be before Labor Day, after Labor Day? Will it be before the midterms in November, the election, or after? But I guarantee you right now, if he is breathing, if he has a pulse, he will be running in the election for 2024.
Right. And I mean, there is a sort of, there has been much comment on the situation, the general political situation in America, which means that, possibly one candidate could sort of not accept the result, or whoever that might be. Do you think that, first of all, that's a possibility, but also would it sort of lead to a really combustible situation in America if that happened?
Well, we already have that combustible situation. Recently, a 22-year-old man was arrested outside the private home of a Supreme Court justice who had planned to murder him and his family, was armed with a handgun, zip ties to immobilize them, a knife. That individual was there to kill Justice Kavanaugh because of the decision on the Second Amendment and the Roe v. Wade abortion decision. So the combustible situation is here. We've had Black Lives Matter and Antifa responsible for more than 600 riots, $3 billion worth of damage done to the nation, more than 40 people killed on the streets of America for quote unquote social justice, Peter, and more than half of those individuals were of the minority, were black, like a retired police captain David Dorn, who was gunned down trying to protect his friend's shop during one of these BLM riots. So we're already there. We're already at that point of violence being normalized by one side, and it's not us, it's not the conservatives, it is the left. To your other point about not recognizing the results of election, well, that's already happened. I was in the White House serving for a president who had been elected by 64 million Americans. And for 4 years incessantly, the Democrats and their lapdogs in the mainstream media said, oh, it was a stolen election, Russian collusion, Facebook this, Facebook that. I mean, we're already there, Peter. So the question is, how crazy will the left become? Or will it, look, let's put it in the historic perspective. I don't like Bill Clinton. I think he's reprehensible in his personal life. But at the end of the day, Bill Clinton was a pragmatist, and when he was the head of the Democrat Party, he reined in the crazies. He actually stole a lot of very sensible policies from Newt Gingrich, the then conservative Speaker of the House. Today, I challenge anyone to name me one person on the left in America in a position of leadership. I don't mean a governor here or a mayor there, but somebody who has national podium and prestige who's reigning in the crazies. There isn't. When we've had 2 million illegal aliens allowed into the nation because of the policies of this White House, when we've got a Supreme Court justice nominee who during her confirmation hearings, as a woman, is asked by a female senator, can you define the word woman? And she laughs, ha, 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 I'm not a biologist. The crazies have taken over the asylum, Peter.
Yes, yes. Do you, I mean, where do you see this leading, Sebastian? I mean, in the sense that, you know, you say they've taken over. We've got a not dissimilar situation in Britain, although I would say that America seems to be in a slightly more developed situation. I mean, it seems to be more acute.
Yeah.
You also have a president now who aids and abets it seems to me.
Yeah.
And so, what, you know, do you see the election, the forthcoming election, whether it be in November or indeed whether it be in 2024, are those the only ways in which this can be turned around? I mean, you know, it's not going to happen on its own, is it?
No, sadly, the elections won't be enough. You know, I want President Trump to win because I think he's the only person who can finish the job that needs to be done in terms of what we call here draining the swamp, getting the, you know, the non-representative bureaucrats out of those positions they've bedded themselves into, who think that the writ of the people doesn't matter. So we have to have, you know, a serious house cleaning exercise. But it doesn't. If any Republican wins, there will be gnashing and wailing of teeth, wailing and gnashing of teeth, and there'll be riots and there'll be bloodshed. For me, look, realistically, the only time some kind of normalcy is injected back into the system is when the radical party that is the Democrats has a crisis of confidence, collapses in on itself, as it did after Carter was routed by Reagan, and says, hang on, maybe we've gone too far. Maybe the idea that critical race theory, teaching that white children are oppressors and brown children are victims, maybe we shouldn't be doing that in the school systems of the United States. There has to be a point at which there's self-reflection and they say, okay, we need to represent the American people. I think it's similar to what happened in the UK. You know, I think Brexit was the shock to the system. It was a message to the political elite that, hey guys, you don't represent us and we want to have a voice in the future of our nation. So I don't think elections are enough, sadly, Peter. I think it has to be one of the parties has to look in the mirror and say, enough.
Yeah. I think actually that's an interesting comparison because, you know, with Brexit, yes, indeed, it was a message. And they never have let us forget it. I mean, essentially, it was probably one of the most depressing times politically in the sense that you found that the institutions of your country were behaving in a way that you just wouldn't have imagined they could. You know, they were actually...
Watching from across the pond, I was dismayed, Peter. I mean, look, I grew up in the UK. I was born in the UK, spent my first 23 years there. Grew up under Maggie Thatcher, lived around the corner from Neil Kinnock in Ealing. And there was a certain way of doing politics. And yes, you could lose touch with the electorate, but you'd pay a price. But then after Brexit, after the greatest expression of the people's will in British history, with what was it, 17.5 million people saying, we want to leave the European Union. Afterwards, what we witnessed in the ensuing, 3 years, every element of the establishment said, we don't care. From the BBC to the House of Commons to the House of Lords to billionaire lawyers who actually said into the camera, I don't care, we're going to stay in the EU. The whole establishment said, a middle finger to the will of the British people. And I was horrified. And, whatever you think of Bojo, God bless him for finally getting the football into the net in terms of implementing it. Although I know there are some issues that remain, but yes, this is why the old taxonomy of left and right, of conservative and Labour and Republican and Democrat seems to break down at this point, because what we're looking at is elites, left or right elites, and the people. And there seems to be a massive chasm between the two, whether you're in the UK or you're in the United States.
Speaking of elites, it was interesting this morning in a paper here, the Daily Mail here, Andrew Neil, the broadcaster, wrote a piece about the New York Times and indeed, the New York Times attitude to Britain and the fact that we seem to be singled out for absolute opprobrium as being this racist, rat-infested hellhole. What's happened at the New York Times, or is this just emblematic, Sebastian, of just the elites we're talking about?
Let's just remind people, put it into historic perspective. This is the same organ that won a Pulitzer Prize for Duranty's covering of the Soviet Union in the 1920s and 30s. Their Moscow correspondent, a man who said, "Gulags? What gulags? Political persecution? What political persecution? Nothing's happening in Ukraine. There is no starvation. There is no famine." This is the New York Times's, history of propaganda. They are now an outreach arm of the Democrat Party. And remember, I love it. I've saved the tweet, and it will be one of my forever tweets. This is the organ that 1 month before the 2016 election, said Hillary has a 92% chance of winning the election, and President Trump can't win it. This is a month before the election, and she is routed by this upstart who's never run for office before. The New York Times or CNN is emblematic of this whole phenomena, or the BBC et al. We have a left that used to represent the working class and really did. I mean, Labour 40, 50, 60 years ago was run by trade unionists, or at least had a serious influence of working class individuals who became politicians. Now it's the same guys who went to Eton and Oxbridge with the conservative leadership. It's the same clique. Here we have the same issue. You look at who is running these newspapers and these media organs. CNN, for example. Peter, I have a daily radio show called America First. It's relatively new. It's 3 years old, 3.5 years old. It's a national show, and I have 3.5 million daily listeners from Los Angeles to New York. And then I have my weekly TV show on Newsmax. When I saw the viewing figures for CNN, I was at the White House, and they prioritized requests for media based upon size of audience. And I was being requested to go and represent the president. And I went into the booking room, and I looked at the whiteboard where the girls had put up the figures, the viewing figures for TV shows. And number one was Hannity, followed by Tucker Carlson. And then down the line, I saw CNN, and I saw this figure. And I said to the girls, how many zeros are missing off that figure? And she said, no, that's the Nielsen ratings. That is the size of their audience. That was 5 years ago when I was in the White House. Back then, CNN on a good night would get 700,000 viewers in America. Today, they are absolutely tanking. They are a disaster with 400,000 viewers. That's less than 1%. That's less than 0.5% of the population. So we give them too much credit on the one hand, but on the other hand, they're massively influential. So look, my philosophy is the same, and it goes for the lambasting of the UK by the New York Times. When I was in the White House, I had a reputation for not working with the mainstream media. I didn't want to talk to them on the record, off the record, on background, because they hated me, they hated my president, and they hated anybody who voted for him. And I said, if the Washington Post or the New York Times writes anything nice about me, the Trump voters should ask for their money back. So it is if they are trashing you, Peter, if they hate the UK, excellent. That's a good yardstick.
Well, that's very comforting to know. When it comes to this president, Sebastian, I mean, here, it's very sort of easy to mock at the loss of memory and all of this sort of thing. But at the same time, it does take me back. I can remember President Carter, and the general display of a kind of weakness which seems to be across the entire administration. And I wonder, what is the future for them? Not that you should care about it, but what is the future for the Democrats?
Well, I do care about it because I don't want a one-party state. My parents suffered under communism. My father, at the age of 20, was arrested, tortured by the Hungarian secret police, and given a life sentence. So my family has lived under, a one-party, an extreme one-party regime. So I don't want that. I want healthy. We have a system that really precludes third parties, but I'd like both parties to be relatively healthy. So let's be historically accurate. When America, and I'm not an interventionist, I served a president who wasn't an isolationist, but he wasn't a neoconservative isolationist. But our message was very clear. I stole a line from the Marine Corps that I've worked very closely with when we were in the administration. I said, now that we are in power, if you want to understand America, I've stole this description from the Marines: no better friend, no worse enemy. If you're our enemy, you will be in trouble, and we demonstrated that. If you are our friend, like Israel or the UK, we will treat you as our friend. When
Yeah.
America is weak, or America is run by people who hate America, and that's the sad truth. I mean, when Obama came into office, the first official thing he did, and it was labeled as such, was an apology tour. He traveled the world apologizing for America's whatever, post-colonial, racist, what have you. If you're run by people who don't like whatever it is, the country or the corporation, then the corporation or the country suffers. And when America is not robust in its presence, then bad things happen. Why? Because bad actors fill the vacuum.
Yeah.
When did Russia invade Ukraine for the first time? When Obama was doing his apology tour, when he was apologizing for America. That's when the Crimean invasion took place. Why did they invade now? It's very clear they invaded because in August of last year, what happened? President Biden surrendered Afghanistan. He ran
Yes.
out of there. He said Al Qaeda's gone. He left more than $83 billion worth of weaponry there. We had people clinging to the outside of airplanes. I mean,
Yes.
it made Saigon look like a walk in the park. At least in Saigon, it was only one helicopter off the roof of the embassy. Here we have thousands of people invade the Bagram Air Base. And then what happens? The KGB colonel in the Kremlin says, okay, guys, roll the tanks. Let's take Ukraine. This is what happens when America retreats. So, how do we solve this? We have a healthy Democrat Party, but I can't solve that. I mean, look at JFK. JFK, this Camelot-like Arthurian figure for the Democrats. He wouldn't be allowed in the Democrat Party today, Peter. Hardcore anti-communist, pro-national security, served his nation in the Navy. He'd be excoriated. That is their erstwhile hero. So we need two healthy parties, but it's up to the Democrats to fix the Democrat Party.
Do you think in the wider culture that America has changed? I mean, I would say, I mean, that's a huge question, I know,
Yeah.
Sebastian, but I mean, the fact is that it seems to me that as someone who's always loved America, it's balked very, very large in my imagination and in my life. I lived there for 5 years. It seems to me that the very things that attract the world about America, America no longer values.
Yeah. So let's be careful.
Do you think that's accurate or not?
I think portions of American society no longer value them. I don't think that's indicative of the majority. So let's look at my story. I'm an immigrant. I chose this nation. I wasn't born here. I still consider it to be the greatest nation on God's green earth. And there's a moment I write in one of my books, and it's starting to give me chills as I say it, because it always does. It gives me goosebumps. The day after the inauguration of President Trump, so after the inauguration, he's sworn in, and then there are parties for the rest of the day. There's numerous balls. The new president has to make an appearance at all the balls. I don't drink. My wife doesn't drink. So the next day, Saturday morning, I didn't have a hangover. And it may have been a Saturday, but I said to myself, hey, I'm deputy assistant to the president. I'm going to go to work in the White House. So I got in an unmarked car driven by a black female sergeant from the army. She drove me to a building next to the White House where I was in process, filled out my final HR paperwork, got my White House badge. And there I am walking into the West Wing, past the security service, the Secret Service, Saturday morning. I'm getting chills right now. I'm standing inside the West Wing. And I'd only become a citizen 5 years previously. And I'm picking
Yes.
out my office and I'm walking around, and it's mind blowing. So,
Yes.
the American dream is alive and well. The fact that I could end up as strategist to the president, the most powerful man in the world, doesn't happen in a lot of countries as an immigrant. If you don't speak, the perfect French, if you didn't go to the right schools, you don't end up in the Elysee in Paris. You don't end up working for the prime minister. So this happening to me, that America is still there. The problem is we have this massive disjuncture between the elites. And look, I find it ironic that I have to remind those born here, my fellow Americans, do you know what you did in 2015 and 2016? You did something remarkable, because there is a connective tissue between every president prior to Trump, from Washington to Obama. They all come from the same coterie. Number one, they were all former senators, congressmen, governors, or retired generals. Every single one, from Washington to Obama. In 16, 64 million Americans said, we need a change. We don't want one of those people. We want a guy who's never run for political office. He wins the first time he runs, and he's an outsider. Yes, he's a billionaire from New York, but he's really a rough and gruff, alpha male from Queens who worked for his dad, collecting the rent in very tough parts of New York. That's what's really changed. To answer your question explicitly, the culture of America hasn't changed in a significant way. The political culture has changed, because we have extremists in an elite who don't represent the majority of the people. And then we have a good chunk. I mean, he got 74 million votes in the last election. We have a very large part of the population who says, we've had it with the elites. And I know others have said it before. I think we were connected through the great guys at trigonometry, Francis Foster, Konstantin Kissin. They get it as well. There is an electable connection between Nigel Farage, Brexit, Modi, Trump. I mean, this is the significant cultural change, not the other things, not what Hollywood is making or what the New York Times is writing. It is the rejection of politics as usual. That's the big change.
Sebastian, you mentioned earlier about your father. I mean, you are of Hungarian heritage. Do you keep up connections with Hungary now? I mean, I am going to ask you a few political questions about it. Do you keep track with Hungary now?
I do follow it. And I do have very, very distinct opinions about Orban. But I left Hungary in 2008. I spent 15 years of my life after I left the UK. I worked for the first freely elected conservative administration in Budapest, trying to get them into NATO back in the 1990s. So it's a large chunk of my life. Then I met my American wife, and we ended up eventually in the US. But yes, I mean, Orban is a topic we can discuss as well.
I think, he made a speech recently where this was only last week, and he talked about the fact that countries like Britain, and I think he might have meant America as well, were what he called post-West. And that basically the real spiritual center now of the West is indeed in Central Europe, I mean Hungary. Would you agree with that, or do you think it's hyperbole?
Having grown up in the UK, I can't agree with that. And having spent 15 years of my life and seeing my children grow up in Hungary, likewise, I can't agree with that statement. So, number one, I think, and you have to correct me because I left the UK in 1994. I think if you go beneath the surface, if you scratch the surface, I think the British spirit of yore, the Tommy, the Churchillian spirit is still there. If you get out of the metropoles, the thing that made Britain great still exists in large numbers. When I look at Central Europe, I see some amazing things that were done. For example, how the Catholic Church survived through communism in Poland, how it brings us St. John Paul II. These things cannot be denied. How Hungary, despite all the problems I have with Orban, and let me be clear, I worked for him. I was the national security advisor to Fidesz in the 1990s when they were just a 7% opposition party. So I've seen the sausage factory from the inside, and they've done some, amazing things, especially when it comes to the EU, putting the Christian identity back into the constitution. But despite that, this is a region of the world that is broken, is truly broken. That's why my wife and I left for the United States. We saw what 40 years of communism did to Hungary. And there's an apocryphal saying that's accredited to Kádár, the dictator of what is called Gulyás communism, that softer form of communism that Hungary evinced during the Cold War, which is very different from Ceausescu's Romania or the Stalinist East German regime. And he was asked once by a member of the Politburo, why do you permit this softer form of socialism? Why do you allow, you can't have a big company in Hungary, but you can have a little shop and you can make the profits from your shop. Why do you allow this kind of quasi softened communism? And Kádár is alleged to have said, it is far efficacious to slowly bend the spine over time than to try and snap it at once, because that's when they resist.
Yes.
We saw that crushing effect on the soul of a nation. The idea that Orban has created this apotheosis of Western Christendom in Hungary. Sorry, Viktor. Why is the guy who fixed your plumbing when you were a nobody in Olcsú Doboz, in the village where you grow up, why is your plumber now the third richest man in America, in Europe, with half of the state industries that were privatized being owned by your plumber? Explain that to me. So, there are issues to do with corruption and other things. Give them credit where credit's due. But the idea that, Hungary and the Baltic states are the new Valhalla of Western civilization, I don't buy. As Churchill was right then, he's right now. It is the English-speaking people that will be the bulwark, will be the shield of our civilization. We just have to find our courage again. We have to not respond to things like COVID the way we did. I am absolutely clear on this. I've said this on my show for 2 years now. The biggest challenge, whatever issue you care about, freedom of speech. Here in America, I'm a big Second Amendment guy, the firearms, freedom, whether it's media, big tech. I don't care what your pet rock is, what your key issue is. The one thing we lack the most is courage. The idea that they shut down businesses, they masked us, and very few people said, no, I am a free man, I'm a free woman. That's what we rediscover. When the English-speaking peoples find their courage again, it will be the UK, it will be America that will lead the way.
This is the problem, though, surely, which I think you alluded to there, is that when this all happened during lockdown, during the pandemic, people were remarkably compliant, weren't they? I mean, I remember in Britain, I had this kind of vision. You talked about the Churchillian spirit there. I had this vision of Britain being very truculent when it came to standing up for its rights, and that was nowhere to be seen, apart from what I'd say about 20% of people, maybe. Yeah. I mean, didn't that surprise you?
It was tragic. It saddened me as an immigrant to a country that was built on literally rugged individualism, the pioneer spirit of the guy with his musket going out west with nothing except, a bag of beans, that we just acquiesced. I mean, we had a couple of stories when everyone except Amazon and Walmart were mandated to shut down. We had one female restaurateur in California one gym owner in New Jersey who said, no, I'm not shutting down. And these two stories became national news items. And I thought to myself, hang on a second, this is a nation of 320 million people. It shouldn't have been two stories. It should have been tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of business owners who said, no, sod that. I get to feed my family. My employees get to feed their children. I'm not shutting down. So yes, I was horrified. And I think we've learned the lesson. I dearly hope we've learned the lesson. And we shall see. Look, there are already rumors that the monkeypox thing or COVID variant Epsilon Beta 12 is going to be used as some kind of excuse for another shutdown or maskings or mail-in ballots for the midterms. And then we shall see. Then we shall see whether people will say, no, I'm not going to work, or, no, I'm not letting you shut down my workplace, or no, I'm not letting you mess with the way we run elections. So we'll see. I'm an eternal optimist. I think there's something in the American psyche that leans towards optimism. But yes, COVID was a very serious wake-up call.
Yes, and also, yes, I think it showed all those sorts of things really about the state of the culture. There's no question about that. Sebastian, I'd like to ask. I mean, if you say you're absolutely clear about President Trump running again, would you be involved again?
Look, if
or is that an indelicate question?
No, not at all. It's a tough question for me to wrestle with personally, because it's difficult. It's difficult. So I was a political appointee in the White House. My wife was a political appointee in the Department of Homeland Security. And I thought I had a requisite level of cynicism, having lived in Washington, D.C. for all those years. But I didn't. I was ill-prepared. When I became a face for the president in the mainstream media, the knives came out. And it's one thing to attack me. I'm fine with that. I understand I'm a proxy for the big man. But when the vituperation is aimed at my wife, when one journalist writes 52 hit pieces on me in 6 weeks, when my 18-year-old son, who's in high school, has a hit piece written about him with the word traitor in the headline, really? It's tough. It's tough. If a president asks you to do it, it's not just an honor, it's a duty. So it would be very difficult. It would be probably wrong-headed of me to say no. But I don't think I want to be inside the machine. I'd love to advise the president, especially on one issue that I think is the burning issue. That's personnel. Reagan said, personnel is policy, and never a truer word. We were undermined. We were sabotaged from inside at the highest levels. We can't make those mistakes again. We can't have people come into the administration who think it is their job to be involved in subterfuge to undermine the electorate. So to help the president pick the right people and have some kind of role in advising him, absolutely. But I have too much fun on my radio show and my TV show.
Yes, absolutely. I can understand that. Finally, I don't know whether you've been following it. There's absolutely no earthly reason why you should, but we've been having a Conservative Party leadership contest here for the next Prime Minister. Do you have any kind of observation about the general caliber?
Just last night, I texted with a good buddy, another broadcaster in the UK. I had asked him for a sanity check on Miss Mordaunt, who caught my eye in the prior race. He said he's a big fan. He'd like her to win. I think generally, if I'm allowed to, as somebody who lived there previously and who was born there, it's all much of a muchness. I mean, it really is much of a muchness. It's half a dozen of one and six of the other. We need new figures. Lawrence Fox was impressive. He seemed to implode with his various attempts at a new political life. We need people who take it seriously in terms of being a citizen politician. We have far too many politicians. We need more of the ilk of Trump or whoever else you may the Nigel Farages. who have done something in their lives, who've run something,
Yes.
who've had a career, and then switch. People who, started off at 22 after uni as an intern for the Labour Party or the Conservatives, and then walked their way up the ladder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously, I don't think that
Yeah.
represents the American, represents the American or the British people. Let's have citizens who decide to become politicians. I think that's the future.
Well, so one or other of those much of a muchness people is going to end up as prime minister.
Yes.
The one you mentioned is actually already out of the race, but
Right.
Anyway, we shall see. But Sebastian, thank you so much for talking to us. And all the very best to you, and all the very best as well for the elections coming up in November. And I do hope that you will join us again at some point soon.
I'd be delighted to keep doing what you do. It's voices of sanity like yours, speaking to people who have courage as well, that makes all the difference. So thank you so much. It's been a delight.
It's a pleasure. Great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. That's it for So What You're Saying Is this week. Many thanks to my guest, Sebastian Gorka, and we shall see you next time. Thank you. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.